35.4 is to be as thorough as you can, even though it says that you are to compare anything you've learned to compare these two data sets. You are high school math students, so just simply finding the three measures of center and saying, hey, one has a higher mean than the other one is not the level of sophistication that is expected of you. So what you really need to do is to do as much as you can to compare the data. Doesn't mean you have to do absolutely everything, but you need to be somewhat more sophisticated in approach than just looking at measures of center. They are a good place to start, though. So when we look at these two classes, what I'm going to do first is to find, at least for one of them, the full thing: mean, median, mode, range, interquartile range, 5-number summary, etc., calculating to see if they're outliers, just to make sure that I remember how to do that. So I've gone ahead, for the sake of time, and put Mrs. Jones's classes data in order, and the number of values for that class, there are 15 students. The sum of those values is 203. And I calculated them this way, and I calculated that before I rearranged them to make sure that I actually had the same amounts both times. So my mean, and yes, you do have to show this work, is simply a matter of taking 203 and dividing by 15. So my mean is 13.5 songs. While, yes, you cannot have half of a song, when you're talking about an average, you might have decimal places. If I asked the total number of something, you wouldn't give me a decimal place. So my median, if there are 15 values, there should be 7 on one side of the median, 7 on the other, and then the median would be the value in the middle, because that would make 15 values. So I want to find the 8th value to be my median. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So my median is 9. And nothing appears more often than anything else, so there is no mode. My range, the range is the maximum minus the minimum. So that's 78 minus 0, which means my range is 78. My interquartile range I'm going to have to come back to in a minute, because first I need to find my quartiles. So to find my 5-number summary, again, it's 5 numbers. The middle number is my median, and I already have that. My minimum is the first number. My maximum is the last number. So what I need to find is my first and third quartiles. The quartiles are the medians of the lower half and the upper half of the data. The 9 isn't in either half because it's boxed out. So I have 7 values here. Again, with 7 values, I'd have 3 on one side of the median, 3 on the other side, and the median would be the middle value. That would add up to 7 values. So I want the 4th number. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I want the 4th number here. 1, 2, 3, 4. So my 5-number summary, my first quartile is 5, and my third quartile is 14. As soon as I know those, I can find my interquartile range. It's the third quartile minus the first. So my IQR is 9. Now, even though these aren't final answers, I'm going to go ahead and start boxing them. And I didn't label the median as 9 songs in this case because it's not a final answer. If it was, I'd make sure I labeled all of these with an answer of songs. Now, once I have my 5-number summary, I can do the box plot, the box and whisker plot. I need a number line that goes from 0 to 78. So I'm going to go by tens, starting at 0. I'm trying to space these fairly evenly. I'm not measuring them, but I'm trying to make sure that one gap isn't bigger than another one if I can. The end of the left whisker is at 0. The right whisker goes to 78. Now 78's not on my scale, so I'm going to write a little 78 down here. Not on the not on the number line, but up here to let people know that was at 78. First quartile, so the left end of the box is at 5, and the box goes to 14. The median is at 9. Then this whisker, much easier to do without doing this on here, that is my box plot. Now, to calculate to see if there are outliers, I'm going to take 1.5 times my interquartile range, which is 1.5 times 9, so that's 13.5. I'm going to take that value and subtract it from the first quartile. So I'm going to go 13.5 from this end of the box. So that's 5 minus 13.5, which is negative 8.5. There are no values in here that are less than negative 8.5, so I don't have any outliers at the low end. Then I'm going to go 13.5 from the upper end of the box. So take the third quartile and add the 13.5, which means I'm going to take 14 and add 13.5 for 27.5. Well, 22 is not an outlier, but 78 is. So 78 is an outlier. So that's everything that I can think of at the moment to do for the data from that one. I could do a histogram or something else, but I think I'm going to stick with what I have right now. Now, Mr. Murphy's class in this order, there are 14 pieces of data, and the sum is 259. So my mean is, keep an eye on the time here, 259 divided by 14, which means my mean, wow, I really can't write today. My mean is 18.5. Again, if it was a final answer, I would label it songs. I'm not going to do that right now. If there are 14 values, there are 7 on one side of the median and 7 on the other. There's not one in the middle by itself. So I actually am going to be between two values. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 to the left and 7 to the right. I'm not boxing anything out because there's nothing in the middle. So my median is between 6 and 8. I need to show how I find that value instead of just eyeballing it. I average those two numbers together, 6 plus 8 divided by 2. So my median is 7. I have two modes. My modes are 2 and 5. They repeat twice. Nothing else appears more than once. My range is 152 minus 0 for 152. My interquartile range is, well, let's find my quartiles. If I have 7 things on this side, then I would have 3, 3, with the one in the middle being my first quartile. So 1, 2, 3, that's my first quartile. 1, 2, 3, that's my third quartile. So my interquartile range is 15 minus 3, which is 12. I'm not going to go and do the box and whisker plot and do the calculating for outliers. We can eyeball in this case and see that 152 is an outlier. But if you're required to show the calculations on a problem, make sure you know how to do that. What they do sometimes, now I've got to compare these. And it says write at least one statement that summarizes your findings and comparisons. So if I look at these two, the mean is 18.5 here, 13.5 before that. Median in the first one is 9, median in the second one is 7. So actually, it looks like with the median being 7, overall, my data, number of songs from Mr. Murphy's class, is smaller, as a general rule, than the number of songs downloaded from Mrs. Jones's class. However, the mean is higher. And I may ask myself why. Well, the mean is higher because, yes, 78 is an outlier, but 152 is way further out than 78. So what happens sometimes, and this is a possibility that you could do, you could say, if I took my outlier of 152 out, and my outlier of 78 out here, the way that would change this data, n would be 13, and my sum, instead of 259, would be 107. So my new mean, if I calculate it that way, 107 divided by 13 is 8.2. And I would have to explain what I'm doing here. Whereas here, if I took one of those values out, and I took that value of 78 out, so 203 minus 78 is 125. And if I take 125 and divide it by 14 for my new mean, my mean here is 8.9. So if I disregard the outliers, they're actually fairly close for their averages, fairly close for the mean and the median. It's just the influence of that outlier skews the mean for Mr. Murphy's class much higher. The interquartile range for the second one is 12 and for the first one is 9. Not an enormous difference there. The range is huge though, because that's the max minus the minimum, and the maximum minus the minimum is much different. So if I were going to write a paragraph about this, I would say, while on the surface of it, the mean for Mr. Murphy's class is much higher, when I look at removing the outliers and I recalculate the mean and the median, I find that the classes are actually fairly close. And I might talk a little bit about the interquartile range and the range, but that's really what grabs my attention about this problem.